Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the Ambassadorial Wing and another installment of the Council of One's Babylon 5 review. And glad to see you all again this afternoon. The usual suspects once again in the chat. Bureau 31 and Archer Colin. Gentlemen, good afternoon and good evening to both of you. Thank you for being here. And whether you're watching on YouTube, on Facebook, or on Twitter, hope you all enjoy the stream this afternoon and hope you all have had a great week. It is great to be back once again and great to be back with my fellow council member. Unfortunately, our good friend and Lord Koj, he's held up in MedLab and he's not going to be able to join us this afternoon for the festivities. But that being said, make sure you smash that like button, share this out with all of your Babylon 5 friends, especially since we got the announcement that Mr. Szynski is going to be doing the reboot. And if you are not familiar with OGB5, this is the place where we come together every week and we break down every single episode from beginning to end. And today we are going to be covering the episode No Surrender, No Retreat. Alicia, my friend, good to see you as always, and thank you for being here. So
great to be here, and it was an excellent episode.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Lots to dig into. And as always, our good friend, our fellow council member Fiona Wolf, has been gracious enough to record her thoughts for this week's episode. So I'm going to pull that up and we'll give her a listen, and then we will get into the discussion as well. So give me 1 second, everybody, and we will get this on the road.
Yes, and Fiona's link is just in the chat, so subscribe if you haven't already.
Yeah. I couldn't ask for a better mod, couldn't ask for a better friend than my fellow council member here, Mountains of Elysium. So, because he has pretty much been here from the beginning. So, all right. Here we go. Fiona, thank you as always, madam. And we look forward to seeing you back with us live next week. So, here we go.
Yes. No surrender, no retreat. This is a pretty big turning point for season 4 because from here on out, it's pretty much the Babylon 5 team is gunning for Earth, and they're going to basically kick up the hornet's nest again because they already got rid of some precursor races, but now it's time to finally nip it in the bud at home. Boy. Oh, there's gonna be so much pain in the next few episodes. Oh boy. And of course, Ivanova has one of my favorite lines with the all the upheaval that's happening. They got to tie down communications. So Ivanova states at one point, "Trust Ivanova. Trust yourself. Anybody else, shoot them." She always has a way with words, as blunt as they are. But yeah, it just showcases just how much they're amping up everything. And even how much Clark is amping up stuff because he's actively sending out, new destroyers to blockade people. And then again, you'll see a little bit later that some of them are enhanced with, shadow tech. And the way Sheridan opens the episode pretty much pins it to the forefront, enough is enough. They've had enough pussyfooting around, and they're going to put their foot down and get the ball rolling, at least properly. And then the other part between Corin and Ivanova, I was noticing the new paint job on the White Star too. Won't they know it's him? And then the Ivanova's like, I think that's the general idea, Lieutenant. Yeah. He wants everybody to know that he's coming for Clark, and that's just how it's going to be. And of course, Londo's whole setup with G'Kar, and it does do a callback, way back in season 2 with, where Londo and G'Kar shared a drink, and G'Kar was like, it's to the health of your emperor. Well, this comes back to bite Londo in this episode where G'Kar doesn't pour the drink on the floor. He just, waits till Londo's finished presenting it. He takes it, and then he pours it back into the bottle. that little moment also showcases how even Jakar has changed a bit. The old Jakar would have been much more blustering, boisterous, and his teeth at Malari's throat. The current Jakar is trying to take a more measured kind of stance. Yes, they went through a lot, and yes, he did help Malari save Centauri Prime, at least in the short term. You figure out in the long term, the Drakh are already there causing shenanigans. But yeah, it's rather telling of everybody's dynamic, where everybody is having their own versions of a civil war. The Narns went through a semi-civil war, especially after the fall of the ruling polity they had. Like, because some Narns wanted to roll over and placate, and other Narns wanted to form their resistance against the Centauri again. You had the Minbari Civil War. You have the Human Civil War. It's just like one war after another for right now, at least in Babylon 5's short history here. And this episode really showcases that Sheridan does know some of the people that are on the other side of the conflict, and he does manage to convince some of them to turn back or turn away from the fight or not participate. And he even uses these are illegal orders and everything. But it also gives you a sense of Clark is using strong-armed stuff to keep people, air quote, loyal, or at least in line somewhat, which is the reason why, I guess, even though Ivanova isn't going to be around for season 5, that does give Lockley a chance to showcase what some other people were thinking, that were basically towing the line to either save their necks or prevent their family from being put up against a wall and shot, because I wouldn't put it past, something like Clark to really do that, because he was willing to use everything and anything else to get what he wanted. Why not just regular intimidation? And this episode also brings up an important issue of they need more humans to come in on the side of Sheridan, because otherwise it will look like an alien coup coming to Earth to, air quote, overtake it, which is ultimately what Clark is trying to poison everybody to, the alien overlords are going to come in and slave us and that sort of thing. But no, Sheridan's trying to build some bridges with the defectors if he can, so that way a whole flotilla of them can be at the forefront of coming back to Earth to free it, and not just be not just be like, oh look, here comes Delenn and everybody, and wait, is this a repeat of the Minbari War? That sort of thing. And it's just like, oh boy. And then, in a surprising twist, Jakar does eventually come back to Malari and say, okay, I'll sign this agreement about, our support for Earth and its resistance, but I won't sign on the same page. So it showcases that, yes, Jakar does understand what Malari wants to do, and that it genuinely does have a good effect for everything, especially after everything else they've gone through under Cartagia and all sorts of shenanigans with various governments, or say shadowy progenitor races. But yeah, it showcases this, the reason why Jakar will be the perfect person to write that declaration of principles that the Interstellar Alliance will do its darndest to stand by. And of course, like with any movement or any kind of newly formed government, those are the most how shall we say, formative years. The first decade or so, you'll really get a sense of how is this government gonna act, or what they're going to be built on. And I'm genuinely glad that Sheridan was able to convince his old friend Mackie to join up with them, alongside, I think, one or two of the other captains. And you'll actually get to see some of the captains try to do a more neutral stance, like they'll take X, Y, or Z over to the penal kind of jail colony and be like, okay, we will bring them up under war crimes and things like that. But you can see the kind of the bursting limit that the Earth military is in right now. It makes you wonder how many people genuinely went rogue to say bye-bye, Kark, bye-bye. but I imagine not all the personnel had that option. And while the joint announcement from the Narns and from Mollari, the Centauri and the Narns behind them, Ivanova was able to use that to form a rallying cry also around Proxima 3, like it's been liberated, to try to galvanize more people to join Babylon 5 in, kicking Clark's teeth in. So, like with anything else, some people coalesce together, and then you have Mr. Garibaldi finally leaving the station for Mars, seemingly never to return. But we all know whose coattails that he's getting pulled along with. Mr. Bester still has his machinations waiting in the wings. See you later, everybody.
Well, and as always, Fiona has a very succinct and a very well-rounded way of putting her thoughts into every episode that she does these videos for. And Fiona, once again, thank you, madam. We appreciate it as always. We do miss you, and can't wait to see you next week when you're back live with us. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So, Elysium, your thoughts?
Yeah, she really does a good job and pretty much covers the entire episode. I mean, she starts off, she's right. I did love Ivanova's line, trust yourself. Trust Ivanova, trust yourself. Everyone else, shoot him. It's very Ivanova.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Londo Jakar line throughout it was brilliant. And you do see how both of them have changed.
Yes.
And you could see throughout that Jakar wanted to support Londo because he knew what Londo was saying was correct. But there was just so much history. And it's just, it actually popped into my mind. There was a little of Ireland and Britain during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Ireland wanted to join on Britain's side, but there was so much pain from their occupation of us that our government knew it would just be too volatile. Even though the majority of people wanted to support Britain and wanted to support the war against the Chaplin impersonator in Germany. I won't mention the name.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
And no, that's it.
Okay. Well, and I will address some of the comments in the chat. And Drake Tungsten, if you're still here, Drake, thank you for tuning in today, and I do hope you enjoyed the discussion. And I'll bring up Colin's comment here. But even the bad guys have at least some motivations for their actions. Just goes to show the quality of the storytelling. Yeah, Archer, you're Colin, you're not wrong there, because Clark is power hungry. We understand this. It's a fairly straightforward motivation, but it makes sense. And okay, Drake, glad you're here, bud. Appreciate it. Honestly, Clark could be considered a fairly shallow villain or antagonist for the series, but I think when you're dealing with so many different themes like a series like Babylon 5, and you've had such a epic and awesome antagonist, quote unquote, in the form of the Shadows, with a very heavy and complex motivation and a plot line just running throughout, it's nice to keep things down to brass tacks. Clark is the bad guy. Clark is the enemy. Clark is corrupt. Ergo, we don't like Clark. We don't like what he's doing. So let's go get him and kick his butt and throw him in prison for a very, very long time. And, you have a very clear cut. This is by no means necessarily a gray conflict. There is a clear dividing line, relatively speaking. But then again, there isn't, because even that the second in command of the Heracles, she says, I don't agree with Clark's policies, but I don't necessarily agree with what you're doing either in the aftermath of the battle for Proxima 3. And she's like, we're gonna hold our captain responsible for what he did, but we're not on your side either. So you can see that there is moral issues going on within this conflict, and that for me is the really intriguing thing about the whole Earth Force Civil War, or EarthGov Civil War, wherever way you want to title it, because both sides thinks that what they're doing is right. But if you really look at all of the crony organizations that Clark has set up, and Sheridan says it perfectly, the Night Watch, Ministry of Peace, Ministry of Truth. Does this sound like the alliance that you all signed up to join? When it sounds very Yahtzee-esque. I'm using the nice term, at least as best I can. And obviously, Straczynski did create these and did name these different agencies within Clark's government very deliberately, because it does harken back to the 1930s and the 1940s in Germany, in Europe. I mean, think about it. In a lot of ways, the Night Watch is essentially the Gestapo. I mean, I even think that there was a Ministry of Peace or something to that effect in the Yahtzee regime during the 1930s and the 1940s. There was a Ministry of Truth. And it's a very interesting and I think a very timely commentary that Straczynski put. Colin, yeah, you're not wrong. Yahtzee! Indeed. But, and you could even say that Clark is a analog or a parallel for either Stalin or that short, angry German guy. One or the other. And I think that was rather deliberate, because you think about it, Earth under Clark is basically a dictatorship with ISN as the propaganda arm. You could consider some of the anchors there at ISN the futuristic version of some of the head names of the propaganda machine for the Yahtzee party in Germany. Just saying. So, Elysium, your thoughts?
No, I was just thinking that, yeah, Clark is the bad guy, but he's more of a face for the real bad guy, which is the Ministry of Peace, which are the people behind the machine pulling the levers. And I know JMS actually dug out the quote on the Lurker's Guide. Pop it in the chat. He was asked, why don't we ever see Clark? And he said, I want Clark to be more of a force than a person, because we see the same attitude come up in, let's say, Deconstruction of Falling Stars in 500 years, when the spirit of Clark comes up again. And I think it could have been Clark was a figurehead. And I do like that people on his side are good. The captain who takes over I believe is the Pollux, where she
the Pollux gets destroyed. You're thinking of the Heracles.
That's it, the Heracles. That she agrees that while I'm not fighting for Clark, I won't fight for you. The propaganda has been effective, which is probably why Lockley fought against, and Fiona brought that up. Lockley fought against Sheridan. That they have principles. Mackie was still fighting for Clark when Sheridan convinced him, you know what, you can see you've been asked to fire on civilians. You know these are illegal orders. So he does convince several. And because he takes the mask off and allows them to then make an informed decision. And going back to Colin's comment, what happens when the people decide he's wrong? And with Clark's propaganda, that's always a possibility. And the danger when maybe putting too much emphasis on Clark when Sheridan should have been maybe attacking the spirit.
Yeah. Very true. Very, very true. Because it's more difficult to. It's a lot easier to debate an idea than to debate a person per se. Because if you think about it, Clark's ideas last long after he is gone. And if you even think about it, you can defame and destroy a person's credibility and their reputation. I mean, look at the episode, look at that one particular segment of Deconstruction of Falling Stars, where you have the futuristic Yahtzees. I mean, can you say? I mean, the little SS medal on the collar of that one guy's coat. I mean, that's quite literally harkening back to the SS of the Nazis back in Germany during World War II, for heaven's sake. So
and he did look the perfect Razzie, all right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And do want to say hello to a new face, one that I haven't seen, Shane Nolan. Shane, good evening. Thank you for being here tonight, and hope you do. Hope you enjoy the stream. So,
Dia Gwit, Shane, Conasatal too, and will to Gama. Just he'll understand that, I hope. Although Irish has been taught really badly here in this country.
I can understand that. And hey, whether you're British, English, or good little bread black American like yours truly, everybody's welcome here. So thanks for being here, Shane. And I do hope, like I said, I hope you enjoy the stream. So, but kind of moving on to another part of the episode that I really wanted to dig into, and that was the whole situation with Londo and G'Kar. That for me was, I think, one of the highlights of the episode. Not to say that the whole episode wasn't interesting. It was, most definitely. But for me, the liberation of Proxima was fairly straightforward. While there was some issues there, and we can dig into that a little bit more. The thing I want to, we've all had conflicts and butted heads with people in our past and in our lives, people that we've encountered at various phases in our life, and those can come to be very painful issues, or they at the same time you can find a way to coexist with the other person. And I find it interesting, as Fiona and you yourself have mentioned, Elysium, that G'Kar, he once would have been full of blow and bluster, but now he's very measured, very reserved. He says his piece, and it's very biting. And I think it's even more biting that he keeps his temper in check. He isn't going flying off of the handle like he would have earlier on in the series. And it speaks it speaks just as much to G'Kar's evolution as a character as it does Londo's, because Londo, I think he has gone through what they call a dark night of the soul, and I've actually gone through a few of those myself, where you realize all of the mistakes, and all of the shortcomings and so on that have happened in your life. All of the words that were spoken that should have never been spoken. And Londo has come to the realization that he has done some horrific and horrendous things and ghastly things in his life. But he did them all in the name of Centauri Prime. And, the interesting thing is it shows a level of maturity, and it shows a level of self-introspection that you don't see. You don't see it as often as you should, but at the same time, you see it more often than we realize in various forms of media. And for a character like Londo to realize that very fiery and impassioned speech that he gave to Mr. Morden led to more grief and more heartache and more sorrow and more bloodshed than he ever really intended. I mean, you see the look on his face when they're using mass drivers to bomb the Narm home world. And I will bring up Archer's comment here because I think it's very appropriate. Some must be sacrificed if all are to be saved. G'Kar realizes that some of those sacrifices may be required from unexpected places. Yeah. And I think for G'Kar, he realizes that Londo is trying to be amiable to him, trying to build a bridge to him to where they can possibly at least peaceably coexist. And I think for G'Kar, well, actually, Londo says it best. There's too much history, too much blood between the two of us for us to ever be friends. But we can at least be civil. We can at least coexist together and not be constantly ripping at each other's throats and tearing each other down. And Elysium, you said it perfectly. I'll bring it up here. Pride is the hardest thing to sacrifice. But the interesting thing is, Londo sacrifices his pride in going to G'Kar and saying, my government has issued this statement or is wanting to issue this statement in support of Babylon 5. Will your people do the same? And G'Kar, for one brief moment, swallows his pride, does have that drink, but on his terms. And he says, I will sign the statement, but not on the same page. And in that one particular moment, Londo realizes that there is hope for him and G'Kar. And both separately and together. So, at least.
I was saying when G'Kar sat down and had that drink, I think like Andrea Katsoulis and Peter Jurasik, they're two amazing actors.
Yes.
And just a look on Londo's face, I think I listened to the Lore Runner during the week before I do it because he does a really great breakdown. And he speaks of Londo's went in with hope to G'Kar because he stuck out his neck and pretty much, I've got my government behind me, so you're not going to be screwed over. Where previous G'Kar had been tricked, Londo lays it out and tells him, no, what I'm telling you, I speak for all of Centauri. We want you. We want to work with you, not, look for forgiveness, not put the past behind us, but work together for hopes of a better future. And walking out of that room crushed. And then the look of joy, that he has the shock, the joy that there's hope for the future when he's sitting with Londo at the bar. I mean, that was just a beautiful scene. In fact, both scenes, the two of them, the contrast, it's what makes Babylon 5 great.
Yes. Well, and I've butted heads with people in my life, both in real life and online. I'd be lying to you all if I said I haven't. I have. And this is not me trying to pat myself on the back, or anything to that extreme, but someone that I had butted heads with back a year or so ago, I reach out to through an intermediary, and I've actually had the opportunity to interact with on a limited basis. But I told that individual, look, I'll keep it simple. If you see me in a chat, know that I am there because I am interested in what you have to say. We do not have to be friends. We do not have to associate beyond this little bit here. But know that I am letting the past go. And I would like to at least be able to coexist with you rather than us be adversaries. And for the little bit that we have spoken to one another, it has been civil. I'm not saying we'll ever be the best of friends, but we can at least be civil. And I think the situation with Londo and Shakar is a very excellent example of two people who have a past, have a history, but have found a way to coexist and live together rather than constantly be at each other's throats. And the interesting thing, it's an interesting dynamic because Londo says to him, it's interesting how we fall into familiar patterns with one another. He's like, we're like two comets that flare up when we get too close to the sun. And that's very true. It can be very easy to just let the past rule us. I've had my issues with certain family members in my own in my family, both living and deceased alike. I mean, I've got a cousin who I absolutely love, but who is acting like a complete and total idiot. And I just want to grab her by the shoulders and shake her, and say, we love you. Quit acting stupid. Not to interject any of my personal life into the discussion here, but I don't hate her. I just want her to do better, and I want her to be a part of the family again. And I think Londo's attempt to reach out to Shakar is to say, look, yes, we just went through a horrific war. Yes, we have bad blood between the two of us, but does that mean we always have to be antagonistic towards one another? Can't we just sit down civilly and share a drink? And I think there's a lot of real life truth in that. Because oftentimes we take the I won't back down, I won't retreat, and I certainly won't surrender an inch of my pride. When instead it's better to try and at least surrender a little bit of our pride to make things better between very different parties. There's a quote from the one of the Marvel movies. It's Captain America: Civil War. It's actually at Peggy Carter's funeral, and it's Sharon Carter, and she gives this very beautiful and very poignant speech about her aunt, who she loved and respected immensely. And there's a line of dialogue in there that she quotes as something that her Aunt Peggy Carter said to her. Where you compromise, do so. But when you can't, don't. When the whole world is telling you that something wrong is something right, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree. And when the whole world tells you to move, you say no. You move. And in that particular line of dialogue, there's truth there as well. Because there is a very clear demarcation between right and wrong. And for Sheridan and Ivanova and all of them, they see that what Clark is doing is wrong. And Clark and all his people are saying, no, what we're doing is right. And Sheridan is like Peggy and Sharon Carter and saying, no, you're wrong. We're right. So you need to move. You need to do the right thing. There is a moral ambiguity there because it is wrong to kill civilians who are trying to get out of a war zone. It is wrong to blockade a world that simply wants to live free. It is wrong to bomb civilian targets on Mars. I'm speaking hypothetically of Babylon 5 itself here. It is wrong to do all of these things. It is at times like that one has to take up the sword or the gun or the pulse rifle and fight back against tyrants like Clark. So, Elysium, any thoughts on what I brought up or just your thoughts in general?
No, it actually just popped into my mind about Londo and Jakar not being able to, at the start, not having difficulty to deal with each other. There is a very great parallel about people coming together from my own history, from Ireland's history. In 1922, there was a peace treaty between Ireland and England, and it was very contentious. And on one side, there was Winston Churchill, was one of the negotiators for England, and on the Irish side, there was Michael Collins, and those two hated each other, much like Jakar and Londo. But during the negotiations one night, both of them went out, pardon my language, but they got shit-faced drunk together.
You're fine,
and they
man.
both realized they both loved the same poetry, they both loved the same things, and they were both working for their own country. And they had ended up with great respect for each other. And both sides took pride to sign that treaty. And it's just I just noticed that parallel between Jakar and Londo and between what Michael Collins and Winston Churchill, or what could have been. Unfortunately, Michael Collins was assassinated a few months after, so we'll never know what would have happened. And my earlier comments about Ireland remaining neutral, had Collins survived, he would have been the national leader. He was basically our president at the time. He would have supported what would have been his friend. Even though there would have been contention, he would have had the force of will to bring Ireland in on the side of the Allies. Unfortunately, it just took people leaving Ireland to serve for the British forces, and many did. But it's just bringing up the parallel. And I found it was poignant because my own grandfather fought in that boat wars, the war that led to the treaty between Ireland and England, and the unfortunate civil war that followed. In Babylon 5 setting, Jakar had survived, so there had been, like Fiona mentioned, there had been like a Narn internal conflict, almost civil war, but Jakar surviving prevented that. Unfortunately, in Ireland, it didn't happen.
It's wonderful. That's a hell of a thing. To the best of my knowledge, my family never. I can't really trace back my family history, unfortunately, because I'm adopted. So it makes things a little tricky on trying to trace back lineages and bloodlines and all that sort of thing. But reaching a place in your life and with others where you can coexist and try to do the right thing, even though you might have a disagreement with the other party. It speaks a lot to both parties when they're able to bury their differences, or at least put their differences aside to come together for a common goal. And it really fascinates me because the elder gentleman in Ad Zahadum that talks about Sheridan as a nexus. Every decision he makes has massive consequences for others down the road. And he truly was a nexus point. He was a crux of how the entire universe, the B5 universe, was shaped. And that speaks very strongly to the strength of Straczynski's writing. And he has the capacity to create these characters that seem monolithic, but at the same time, they're very relatable. And it is an amazing thing to think that one man, one person can change the course of history itself. So, and I do want to send a shout to the chat, Superior Hero Collectibles. Superior, it's good to see you as always. It's been a little bit, and glad you're here today. And Shane Nolan, yeah, I would definitely say that is a very good observation. Yeah, Adama, especially Adama in the BSG reboot, he was very much a nexus point. He really changed the course of everyone's life around him. And it wasn't just him alone. It was other people that were in his orbit that did the same thing. But Adama, yeah, absolutely. I would say that what he did in the course of that series did change the course of life for everyone. And he was also the catalyst for the lives of others around him to be changed, the course of history itself to be changed, rather than continue the cycle of conflict with the Cylons through him. The entirety of human history was given a chance to be made better. Even though at the end of the reboot of BSG, we do see, I'm assuming it was the Cylon versions of Cylon 6 and Baltar that were walking around.
Yes. Yeah, they were the two, they took the image of the angels, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to answer your question, Elysium, yes, you can absolutely put that link in there. So, and I'll bring up Colin's comment here. Ambassador, where you're saying that one man can make a difference. Yes. One man, one woman, one person can make a difference. You just have to have the will and the strength to do that. So, and I'll bring up Shane's comment here. Yes, my father is the Michael Collins Historical Society or Memorial Annual event. Lots of interesting history on him in particular. Elysium, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't they do a movie about Michael Collins that had Liam Neeson in the starring role? Am I thinking of the right movie?
It was, and there is a chance my grandfather was on the opposite side to Collins in the Civil War, and it was his division, his brigade were involved in his assassination. I don't know, was my grandfather involved or not? Unlikely. I think he was, at that time, I think he was a POW. He was captured in an action in one of the local towns around Cork. But it was definitely his, the West Cork Brigade were involved in his assassination. unfortunate. And even though Collins himself was from the region, the people who shot him were, he was from West Cork himself.
Interesting. And I'll bring up Colin's comment here. Sorry, I have the Knight Rider theme tune going in my head. Yeah, Colin, I do get that reference. Michael Knight, David Hasselhoff. Yeah. So, well, Elysium, any other thoughts on this episode that you want to get out there?
I think it's really difficult trying to come up with something when Fiona has covered pretty much everything.
Well, I think the good thing that Fiona does is she gives us a jumping off point, and the main two plot lines in this episode obviously were the liberation of Proxima 3, and obviously the whole situation with Londo and Shakaar. And I will say this. Shakaar's speech there at the beginning of the episode when Sheridan says, "Y'all don't have to come to Earth's aid. You are free and clear." And Shakaar's speech there was very accurate. He's like, "Where was Earth when the shadows were running roughshod all over our alien butts? And where was Earth when we needed help?" So he's like, "To hell with them. Listen to Sheridan here. He's right. Why should we give them a drop of attention whatsoever?" And I like how that whole situation. Bureau 31, you're awful. No, you're not. The EAS Heracles opening fire is one of my favorite CG shots in B5. Pew 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 pew. Yeah, Bureau 31, you're not wrong there. And it just Shakaar nailed it right on the nose. He's like, "We don't owe Earth anything." He's like, "The humans here, yeah, we can back them up absolutely." But he's like, "We don't owe Clark and them. We don't owe Earth specifically anything."
Yes.
Long live Video Toaster. Oh, Drake, you're a mess. But yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
I was actually thinking had Sheridan asked the League we need your forces to help us, he could have won that civil war within the episode with the Minbari, the Centauri, the Narn, and the entire League behind him, and they all would have supported him. He could have easily just steamrolled, but like Fiona mentioned, he needed to have a human. Like he said, "I want a clean fight, just humans fighting humans."
Yeah. And you know what? That shows a level of integrity on the part of Sheridan. Even though technically they're using Vorlon Minbari hybrid ships for their war, but what else are they going to use? Just Star Furies and shuttles? That ain't gonna work.
Like that line from Aliens, "What can we use? Harsh language?"
Yes. Oh man, that's yeah. Well, but it's as Fiona pointed out, we're gonna be zooming in on the finale of season 4, and I do want to let you all know we will be covering season 5, obviously, and me and the council are going to be talking what we're going to be doing after that. We probably will cover Crusade, but once we're done with our review of Babylon 5, you might be wondering, well, where's the council going to go? Well, we're going to discuss that, and we'll figure that out when the time comes. So, but I do think we're going to go ahead and wrap up for the evening. And I do want to thank Fiona Wolf for her contribution, and Elysium, my good friend. I want to thank you also for being here today, and to everybody in the chat. Thank you all as well for all of your comments and for your participation today. This channel, these streams are not just for us; they are for you as well, and we appreciate and we're glad that you're here each and every week. And of course, as always, make sure you smash the like. Make sure you share it out with your friends. And if this is your first time to Ambassadorial Wing, I do hope you enjoyed your time here. And if you're not subscribed, consider hitting that subscribe button. I do want to let you all know I will be back tomorrow evening at 7 or 7:15 Central Time. I will be bringing you all my review and discussion of Denis Villeneuve's adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune. And that I will tell you all. I went and saw an IMAX last night, and it was absolutely stunning in a good way. And of course, we will be back next Friday with another installment of the Council of One. So be sure to hit those reminders and everything. And I will be going live next Thursday with another installment of Thriller Thursdays as we lead up to All Hallows Eve. And I'll be discussing one of my all-time favorite films from one of my all-time favorite directors, the one and only John Carpenter. And we'll be talking about his remake of a ultra retro classic, The Thing. And that will be, I believe, at 7 or 7:30 Central Time. So, but anyway, folks, you all have a great night and a great weekend. I will see you back here tomorrow night. And until next time, this is the Council of Ones saying, you ready? One,
Zooty. All right.
Zooty, Zooty, Zoot, Zoot, Zoot.
Zoot. Zoot.
Good night, everybody.